The hard part about reading books to get smarter is that there are certain books that are written for dumb guys. And these books are made to make you feel smart without actually making you smart. And that is dangerous. The best way to tell if you're reading a book for dumb guys is if you get to the end of a chapter and it gives you a little summary of what it is you just read. Usually there's like a bullet point list and some, key takeaways that they've highlighted for you. Dumb guys love a summary. That is what it is that they're actually after when they read a book. Dumb guys don't actually like reading, but they do acknowledge that this is a good way to learn things. They like the feeling of having read. Each book is a kind of conquest for them. It's a point of pride. Hey, look at all these books that I've read. That's why dumb guy books are written in a very breezy, simple manner. It's the kind of language that is understandable by a middle schooler, but written for an adult audience that wants to feel smart. The dumb guy mistakes the summary for the real thing. He thinks that most of the book is unnecessary. This is just a barrier to the real nuggets. Everything that's not a nugget is useless. This is, distraction to be discarded. This mentality of reading books and approaching reading as a tool for extraction. This is a big pool of data, and I need to extract the value out of it and move along. That is their whole goal in the process, is to get through things as efficiently as possible with the least amount of work and effort, and then just move on to the next book. All of these suckers who are sitting down and actually reading books line by line, they are approaching things inefficiently. Oh, the time you spent reading that one book, I could have read 10 books. Look how much further along I am. This mentality mirrors the financialization of the modern world, of the modern economy. You can pick up your phone right now, open up Robinhood, and buy a share of Google. And right then, you own part of Google. You are now a shareholder. But buying the Google stock does not mean that you were there to build Google. It doesn't mean that you have some special knowledge about Google's technology or its plans for the future. All you're doing is buying a piece of the ride. You are buying a piece of the outcome. Whatever future profits may come along, you are now a part of that. That is the same way that dumb guys view a summary of a book, its key takeaways. You didn't actually do the work of understanding what's in front of you, of wrestling with it and seeing it from different angles. You jumped to the conclusion. You bought a share of the result rather than doing the work to get there. And like in, the market, this only works during a bull market. When a conversation is easy and you can just recite talking points, that is the bull market. That is the line going up. But when you are confronted with unforeseen circumstances, when the market gets rough and you enter the bear market and you're actually forced to defend your points, all of a sudden you're in trouble. All of a sudden you realize that you are leveraged. Leveraged in, the sense of investing is basically it's borrowing. You're investing on credit. I have a small amount of capital and I'm using leverage to multiply its value. And I'm taking that new value and investing with that. That is the same way that the dumb guy book approaches knowledge. I'm going to do the smallest amount of work to acquire the most amount of resources. And like I said, this works for a little while until it doesn't work. Leverage in the market is a superpower until it's not. Until you're actually forced to reckon with reality. All of a sudden you get margin called. And in an argument, when somebody doesn't actually know the material, when they haven't actually done the work to get there, all they can do at that point is talk louder. All they can do at that point is, result, to personal insults, bravado. They try to confidence their way through the argument because they know that they don't actually have the idea down. They haven't actually thought it through. They read the end of the chapter. They didn't read the whole chapter. An idea. People have said this before. An idea is like a 3D object. It's like you have the 3D cube in your mind. And if you really have the idea, if you know what it is that you're talking about, you can revolve the cube. You can see it from different angles. You can see its component parts and understand the logic that makes it what it is. If you don't have the idea, then all you're seeing is the 2D image. All you can see is what it looks like from this side. And that might work for a little while. That might be enough for you to bluff your way through the argument. But eventually, that will be insufficient. Eventually, you will come up against reality, and you will realize why the cube has to be 3D, because that's what it actually is. The reason for this, the reason people reach for summaries, the reason people reach for simple heuristics and key takeaways is that reality is hard. Reality is complex, and it's very difficult to nail down in a simple manner. That is why the dumb guy book almost always revolves around simplification. It revolves around giving you models and then pretending that the model is not actually a model, pretending that this is the real world. And this kind of surface level thinking pervades the dumb guy mind. This is their worldview. You'll see this especially in debates around economics. Somebody will say something like, actually, this is Econ 101. Oh, this is basic economics. When they say that this is Econ 101, they are not describing themselves. They're not saying, I have an understanding of very basic economics. No, what they're doing is appealing to the authority of economics, the field of economics, and trying to end the argument there. The problem with saying this is Econ 101 is that whatever you're talking about is not actually Econ 101. I guarantee you what you're describing is not Econ 101. Unless we're literally in a, freshman college classroom, whatever you're talking about is not Econ 101. Because the real world does not map out to simple, supply and demand curves. The real world does not have simple problems of rational actors that are approaching the market. The real world is much more complex than that. People act irrationally all the time, as we can see. But for the person who is trying to use this to win an argument, they are ignoring that reality. They are trying to impose their own sense of confidence in the system. But if you really could appreciate economics as a field, you would know that this is not meant to be predictive. It's not meant to map out perfectly to reality. Certainly not meant to just win a basic argument. Economists don't have a particularly insightful view of what's going to come next. If economists knew what was going to happen, they would be investors. They'd be billionaires. They wouldn't be teaching a freshman college class. But there is an appeal to these simplified models because it feels good. It feels good to have the answer and to just be able to throw it on the table like that. It's Econ 101. People also, the dumb guys, love Occam's razor. This is their favorite tool to just bring out every once in a while to slice through an argument. Actually, Occam's razor says that the simplest answer is usually correct. The problem with Occam's razor, the great misunderstanding of this concept, is a category error. Occam's razor is meant to help you choose between a series of options. You choose the option with the fewest assumptions. And, that is the logical way to reach the logical conclusion. The problem with Occam's razor is that people only remember the second part. The full thing is, when all things are equal, choose the option with the fewest assumptions. All things being equal, that is the killer. In real life, all things are never equal because real life includes unknown unknowns. You don't have all of the options. You don't know what it is you're missing. You don't know where your blind spots are. So you never have a complete set of data. You never have a complete set of options to choose from. You are always operating from a kind of bias. Occam's razor is good for playing chess. A chessboard gives you all relevant information. Everything you need to know is right in front of you. So therefore, you can use that constraint to make a logical decision. But in an open-ended real-world scenario, especially something as complex as economics, you don't have all the variables. You don't have all of the, contingencies. You don't see the entire chain of cause and effect, because how could you? That is the complexity of reality. I've said this before, but most people don't like to look at a blank page. That is very stressful for them. Most people don't find a blank page freeing. Hey, you can just draw whatever you want on this page. This is, a blank canvas. You have freedom. Most people would prefer a coloring book because a coloring book already does part of the work for you. You know exactly what your job is. Things are simplified. All you have to do is color in the lines. Most people would prefer a crossword puzzle to a blank page. On the blank page, you can write whatever you want, but that requires you to approach it directly. That requires you to embrace the complexity of the real world. Whereas a crossword puzzle, all you got to do is answer the question. It gives you the first part. It does the real hard work for you. All you got to do is fill in the blank. This kind of desire for a shortcut, the desire for heuristics, the desire to skip to the end of the chapter and read the summary. This is embedded deeply in the Western mind. This is what all Western culture has been wrestling with from the very beginning. If you think back to the story of Genesis, the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, God gives Adam and Eve perfection. The garden will provide them with everything they need. He sets them up to be a part of the garden, to learn to cultivate, to name the animals, to be a part of nature. Everything is provided for you. The one rule, don't eat the apple. The apple of knowledge is the one thing you cannot eat. But the serpent comes along, and of course, Adam and Eve eat the apple, and you have the fall from grace. The fall from grace, the way to understand this in a modern context is that the fall from grace was not a punishment. This was the natural outcome of reaching for the apple. The apple was the shortcut. The apple was the summary. It was trying to get around from doing the work of being in the garden. God tried to give them the real path. He tried to give them the work that they could earn their way, towards knowledge. But they didn't want that. Instead, they wanted to take the easy route. And that's what happens when you take the easy route. You end up, at first, it goes good, and you're eating an apple. And then pretty soon you have fallen out from the grace of God because you tried to be God. You tried to get the conclusion without taking the journey. And that's where you end up. When this dumb guy mentality, when this summary seeking, shortcut taking is applied to the state, when it's applied to government, it can only end in catastrophe. When you think about the French Revolution, you think about the Communist Revolution in China with Mao. These start off with very, idealized movements with a vision of the future. We need to get rid of monarchy. We need to abandon capitalism. Liberty, fraternity, whatever the French thing is. And we need to move towards our goal. We know what utopia looks like. We just got to get there. In France, this led to the terror because they tried to throw out tradition. They tried to throw out all previous culture. They tried to start over at what they called, year zero. All previous ties to, French culture, to our history. We're going to do away with all that because we know where we want to go. The goal is everything. So we just got to jump to it. So when you're trying to achieve this ambitious jump all at once, everybody who is in your way is just an obstacle. They are just things to be done away with. And this is how you ended up with mass violence, people getting guillotined in the street. In China, Mao tries to take the great leap forward We are doing away with the capitalist bourgeoisie. And hey, how about this? Everybody's got a new role now. All of you guys who used to be peasants, you're now farmers. I don't care what it was you were doing in the city. Now it's time for you to go to the countryside and learn how to grow rice. This ended up with, what you ended up with was a bunch of people who don't know how to farm, who now have to become farmers. What you end up with is a society that is trying to jump to a conclusion without actually doing the work to get there. There was some famous story about Mao trying to get rid of, I think he was trying to get rid of locusts. No, he was trying to get rid of the birds who were eating the seeds. So he said, hey, let's get rid of all the birds. But he didn't realize that the birds were eating the locusts. They were eating all the bugs. So when you get rid of the birds, now we just have more bugs. That's how you end up with blight. Millions of people starve to death. All because, look, even if the goal you're trying to move towards was a good one, maybe the goal made sense. The book makes sense. What doesn't make sense is thinking that you can just skip to the end, because that doesn't work. Your model does not map out to reality. And in France, the revolution pretty quickly leads back to monarchy, leads to Napoleon. In China, millions of people starve to death, and then eventually they just come back to capitalism. That is the closed loop of the shortcut, is ending back where you started. Like I said, reality is complex. But the answer here is not to throw your hands up and say, I guess this is unknowable, because we still got to live. This is when you approach the complexity of reality directly, you learn to appreciate morals. You see the importance of having a moral lens. Because even though reality is complex, your moral lens can be quite simple without losing anything of importance. A moral lens is how you know. It's how you determine what it is that you refuse to become. It is a line in the sand. Look, here is a whole list of options for how we can proceed. But I can tell you off rip, we're not doing that one. Human suffering, real humans going through real trauma, that's no good. We're not doing that. So that long list can become quite a bit shorter when you've actually applied the moral lens. So even though what you're left with might still be complex, at least we know we're not going to become monsters on the way there. Demagogues, dictators, the bad guys, they will always try to get around the moral lens by insisting that they are being realistic, that this is a problem that is too tricky for morals, that we need to put on our, realist hat and deal with it. And this is what leads to monstrosity. The Holocaust was originally framed as the solution to the Jewish problem. Leading up to World War II, this was the conversation. This lasted for decades. What are we going to do about the Jewish problem? This was a debate that was being had. When you are presented with a question like that, what are we going to do about the Jewish problem? The correct answer is not to provide an answer to the Jewish problem. The correct answer is to reject the premise outright, because certain things cannot even be entertained. Like I said, the moral lens allows you to cross that off the list. We're not even going to go down that path a little bit. The dumb guy, when given the power of the demagogue, will always try to trip you up, will always try to trip up your sense of morality, of right and wrong, by insisting that there is a need to make tough decisions. They frame this kind of, moral lapse as realism. They'll tell you about something called the trolley problem. Let's say there's a train coming and you control the lever. Over here, there's a guy who's going to die if the train hits him. Over here, there's 10 guys. What do you do? The thing about the trolley problem, and all problems like this, is that they are stupid. They are absurd. You are never actually going to be in the position to control whether a train runs over somebody. So, entertaining these dumb fantasies is a waste of time. And all it can do is chip away at your humanity. And that's what they're trying to achieve, because they're trying to jump past the hard work of actually thinking about right and wrong. They're trying to jump to the end of the book. They're trying to read the summary and just pretend that they got there. The way to think about this problem of complexity, first off, you have to acknowledge that it's there. You have to acknowledge that the book exists for a reason. That's what's so funny to me about book summaries, is that books are already summaries. This author spent probably a few years doing research about this book, writing a very long draft, cutting that draft down, sending it off to the publisher, who sends back a draft that's even more condensed. By the time it gets to you, by the time you're holding the book, this has already been summarized several times. You are already holding a summary of a summary. So when you're asking for a summary of that, you're already so far from the source that there is no way you're actually going to understand anything at a real level. But like I said, the dumb guy book, the way you can tell if the book is for dumb guys is if they treat you like a dumb guy. If they give you the summary. When you see a chapter summary at the end of a chapter, that is the author and the publisher showing their hand. That's what they think of you. They think you're a guy who can't actually take in information. So, let's just throw it in there. Give him some bullet points. That's all he's going to read anyways. When you're reading a book, when you're approaching knowledge, try to imagine, what is it that this person, what do they think I am? What is the audience for this? If I was in an audience, if I was in a room of other guys who read this book, would I appreciate being in this crowd? The answer is probably no. That relationship you have with the author, with the publisher, with the book that you're holding, this is about good faith. That's what this all boils down to. Good faith in an argument is when both parties want to achieve understanding. The goal of the argument is not winning the argument. The goal is learning a little bit more, finding out a new perspective, thinking about your blind spots. But That's not what we have most of the time, especially not, on social media. Social media is almost designed to avoid good faith. Everything about the social media algorithm and the way it's set up is designed for attack, for dominance, for dumb guy thinking. It is one guy with a summary going up against another guy with a summary. Who's got the best talking points? Good faith is the only path that will actually get you closer to the truth. That's why the only real good faith you can have in the world, the only thing you can actually be sure of, is the good faith you have with yourself in your own head. It is the thing that has to stop you from skipping to the end of the book, the thing that stops you from skimming, from trying to get the key takeaways. Good faith means doing the work of actually trying to read the book from beginning to end. Wrestle with it a little bit. If you get bored, okay, maybe you put the book down. But make the good faith effort to actually learn these things, because there is no shortcut. Distance is distance. If you want to go a mile, you got to travel that mile. You can't just be there. There's something people say on like Reddit or whatever. It's like explain like I'm 5. When somebody doesn't understand something, they say, give me the explain like I'm 5 answer. And this is okay. This is a starting point. You got a very simplified version of the answer. It's okay to ask for the explain like I'm 5 version. But it's not okay to be 5 forever.